Hello, my name is Sam Woodhall. I am a video editor, motion graphics artist, and a graphic designer, and I am also a content creator on YouTube as well as Twitch. I'm predominantly known for my YouTube videos, but I have also done heavy graphic work on Twitch for high-end profile streamers such as Pokimane, where I developed and created several graphical assets that she uses on her live streams. I also produce content on YouTube that help guide and teach people how to make their own graphics for YouTube and Twitch using the Affinity tools. And so today I thought I would jump in and show you the creative process behind building a Twitch brand from scratch and show you what goes into that using the Affinity line of design tools. We'll be creating and designing a solid brand that we can use across our Twitch channel as well as our other social media platforms like YouTube and Twitter. We'll also be looking at how the tools inside of Affinity Designer will make that super easy for us. We'll be making several graphic elements that are going to be making up our Twitch channel and making it that much more professional, such as profile pictures, banners, panels, as well as an offline screen. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to focus on my own channel and show you guys the process that I went through for creating the different assets that I use on my page while using Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo to create those different assets. So let's go ahead, jump in and get started. To start off, I'm going to show you guys how I made my profile picture that I use on Twitch and all of my other social platforms. And I'm actually starting off inside of Affinity Designer, and I'm going to go over to the pixel persona over here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on the selection brush right here. And then what I'm going to do is select the layer, and I'm just going to basically increase the size of the brush and basically just select me from the background. What I want to do is remove me from this white background. And the easiest way to remember this inside of Affinity Photo and Designer is whatever you are selecting is what you want to keep. So I am selected right here. I've actually gone over this little area over here as well and just made sure that this part of my arm is actually in. As you can see, we have some white parts of the Twitch logo here that are getting kind of cut off from the background. So I'm just going to zoom in and just go over these areas. If something like this happens, by the way, and you are getting things that you don't want to have in your selection, make sure the selection brush is selected and then hold down the Alt or the Option key on your keyboard and then go over it and it will basically remove it from the selection. So there we go. I'm going to zoom out again. And that is pretty much a very rough area that I want to use. I'm going to refine this now. With the selection brush still selected, I'm going to go over to the refine button right here. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this to refine the mask and go over my hair more specifically and just kind of refine how it looks. Now I'm going to just decrease the border width down just a little bit. So I don't want much of the matte edges and the border width to be affecting the hair. I want to go over this and affect this and adjust this independently. I'm going to go over and select the adjustment brush right here, make sure it's on the matte one. And then I'm going to go around my hair and just kind of refine it just so the white parts from the background that are mixing in with my hair get matted out and adjusted a bit. You can see there how it's kind of blended the matte just a little bit better. And then what I'm going to click apply. And then what I like to do just very quickly is I just go in and zoom around the area and make sure there's no parts of my head or my neck or my face that are being cut off that shouldn't need to. Make sure everything's kind of in a decent matte around the outside edge. And then looking here as well where the white was giving us trouble earlier, making sure that all works. And once I've done that, I'm going to select this little mask button right here. And I'm going to mask me out. And as you can see, you're taking me out of the background. And it's done a very nice job of removing the white parts from my hair. You're going to lose some detail up here. But for the scale in which a profile picture is on social media, it's not that much of an issue. And then once you're done that, you can simply go back over to the design persona by clicking on this button over here. And now from here, we're going to set our background. So I'm going to select on the artboard. I'm going to actually make a background for the artboard itself. And I usually set this to be a dark background. So I'm going to bring this all the way down just to be a dark background like so. And then from here, I actually started adding elements to this to kind of really make this work and make it pop. Adding different social media icons. I want to go for kind of like a social media explosion effect around me. And what I'm going to do all that is I'm actually going to use the assets panel over here with some icons that I downloaded from the Affinity forums. You can find a link to this in the description. Once you've installed these, you'll have access to all of these icons over here on the left-hand side. If you can't see this window, make sure you go to View, Studio, and make sure you select the Assets panel right here. You can also make your own custom ones over here. So I've actually got a few custom ones for Twitch with the new Twitch logos. I also have some with my own logo, and some of the assets that I used inside of my original profile picture that I'll be using inside of this image. So I'm going to actually start off with the main logo. So I'm going to go over to the Font Awesome icon pack, and I'm going to use the icons in this directory inside this pack to build up a social media explosion of sorts. So what I like to do is drag out the ones that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to bring out YouTube and scale that up to a decent size. Discord. And then I'm going to search in the search box here for Twitter. Drag that out. Scale it up. Do the same thing for Instagram. Like so. Scale that up. There we go. And what I'm just trying to do is get all the assets that I need in the window so I know I can place them in the right places. And then I'll go to my own custom pack that I made for Twitch and then drag out the Twitch logo like so. And you can add as many of these as you want. You can have more than one. I want these to be quite large icons and then have smaller supporting elements around me and around these icons. So what I'm going to do is actually start putting these things into place and start coloring them. So I'm going to start off with YouTube, and I can turn off the other icons for now and just focus primarily on the YouTube icon. So I'm going to press Z on the keyboard to bring up the zoom controls. I'm going to zoom in so you have a nice clear view of the button. Press V to go back to the arrow tool. And I was going to increase the saturation and change this to a nice red color, like so. Now, as you can see here, the white bit in the middle is missing from the YouTube logo. However, I want to give this an overall outline as well. But the one thing you can do is actually select the outline right here on the object and increase the color of this to a white. And you can see now there's a subtle white outline all the way around the actual object. I'm going to go over to the stroke properties tool up here, and I'm going to increase the width of this all the way out. And as you can see, it's not really working the way that we want it to. So what we're going to do is actually go down to this button right here and select draw stroke behind. And what that will do is that will put the fill in front of the stroke, so we can actually increase the size of the stroke like that, and it will actually now fill in that white bit and give us a nice big outline as well. It's a bit too big for my liking, so I'm going to bring this down to about 5 pixels like so, and we're still missing that bit in the middle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the square tool over here, and I'm going to make a shape in the middle of the object. I'm going to set this to be a white fill, so I'm going to select the fill option here, make this white. And then I'm going to send this behind the YouTube play button, like so. As you can see now, we filled in that area that was once empty with a rectangle shape. We've kind of just filled in the empty space. I'm going to shift select both of these. I'm going to group these by right clicking and then choosing group. Now that object is completely solid. It is one single object that I can use and scale up and move around my canvas and put it where I want to put it. So I'm going to rotate just a little bit, maybe scale it just a little bit, maybe put it right around here. That's a nice placement, I think. And then from there, we're actually going to go ahead and jump into the Twitch one right here. We're going to actually reveal it back again by clicking the checkbox. I'm going to layer these in order. Go into the group for this actual icon. Click on the combined shape layer, this outside purple layer, because I want to give this also an outline. So I'm going to select on the outline stroke fill here. Give it a white color. Go to the stroke slider and then increase the width like so. As you can see, it's doing the same thing as before. We're going to select the draw stroke behind, and that will send the stroke behind the object and bring it down to about 5 pixels like we did for the YouTube logo. And I'm pretty happy with how that looks and is placed in the image. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to do mostly this side and around me first with these larger icons, and then focus on the smaller details afterwards. So we're going to bring in Discord next. I'm going to bring this about here, make this one a bit smaller. Hold down Command or Control and the Shift key to scale to keep the size proportion and to scale to the center. Scale that down to about here. We're then going to rotate this and put it where we want to put it. Give it the nice blue shade that Discord have. It's roughly that color. We're then going to also give it a stroke as well. I'm going to increase the stroke width and then also make sure that the order is behind on the stroke. Like so, if we zoom in, we can see that the eyes are actually filled in nicely here because of the shape of the object. Zoom back out, and then we're going to move on to Twitter next. We're going to click the checkbox to reveal where Twitter is. Press V to move it. Put in a nice placement to say around about here, like so. Change the color to be more of a Twitter blue shade, like so. And then again, increase the stroke to about 5 pixels. And then send the order to make sure the stroke is behind the fill. Maybe increase this a little bit more as well. And actually looking at all of these, I can actually tell that the YouTube logo is actually just shrunk down just a little bit. So I'm going to increase the scale of that just a little bit. If you are scaling objects and you want to make sure the stroke maintains the proper sizing and width throughout the entirety of the scale, make sure you tick scale with object. And what that does is this object now, if I tick that checkbox, if I scale this, the stroke scales with it. So it doesn't shrink the size of the stroke to accommodate for the size of the object. It actually scales with the overall object. So that's what I've done here. I'm actually going to increase the size of the YouTube logo stroke just a little bit to compensate for that. I'd say about 8 pixels is pretty nice for this one. And then we're going to have Instagram finally. I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to make this one a little bit smaller. Maybe shrink this back down here. Maybe move the Twitter logo just a little bit more. Like so. Bring the Instagram one. I'm going to rotate it. Scale it just a little bit. Now for this one in particular, if I change the color of this one to be more of a pinkish shape, I want this one to be more of a gradient and of a pink and an orange tone to it, like the Instagram app does. So I'm going to press the gradient fill tool over here, or press G on the keyboard, and that brings up the gradient fill tool. And I'm going to click and drag to make a gradient for this object. And you see these 2 pucks have been made on the object. I can select one to adjust this color up here, or select the other one here to adjust this color down here. I'm going to tweak this one right here, and I'm going to bring this color slider all the way down to an orange look like that. Maybe tweak the top one just a little bit to compensate. Like so. You can also change the orientation and how much of a spread there is. If you want a more softer look, you can. Now, the next thing you want to do is actually give this an outline as well, the same as all the others. I'm going to increase the width on this. Make sure it's sent to behind. Like so, and increase this all the way to about 5 pixels. And the next thing we need to do is also fill in these dark spots that haven't been filled in by drawing a rectangle in the middle. Just changing the fill to white. So you can actually clear the stroke by clicking on the stroke and clearing this clear fill button right here, the little white circle with the red line. If you click on that, it will empty the stroke layer. Resize it, maybe rotate the rectangle to give it in the right position and the right perspective. Drag it over, send it behind the Instagram logo, select both of them, right click, and then group. And there we have our Instagram logo sorted and in place. I want to add some more elements to the other side here, but not so much social media icons. I want to bring in social media elements, so retweets, likes, and hearts, things that simulate that experience on social media. And I can do that also by going into the assets panel, going into font awesome, and then searching up retweet, like so, bringing this asset out right here. I'm going to scale this up like so, maybe give it a different color, maybe make it a red, because my branding is a red, white, and black kind of feel, so I kind of want to emulate that in these icons as well. I'd say that looks pretty good. Maybe scale it down, rotate it, make it a bit smaller, and bring it down here. And then when I start adding things like cameras, so I'm going to type in here camera, and it'll bring up a camera icon. Bring that in there as well. The next thing I'm going to do is actually probably bring in a thumb icon right here. So I'm going to go to the material design icons, because I like the Google one. Type in the word thumb, bring in thumb up like that, scale it up, and I think I'm going to change this to a nice blue, as when you like something on Facebook or on YouTube, the thumb turns to blue, and I kind of want to emulate that kind of response. Maybe we should bring in some other elements, maybe a heart to like something as well, like on Instagram. Bring that out here, scale it up, give it a nice shade of red, like it would be on social media if you'd like to tweet. With all of these things now in place, I actually want to start adding in more explosive elements like I have in the original profile picture. Things like lines, circles, squares, crosses, and triangles, different shapes to add movement and show a bit more of an explosive element to this picture. And as you can see, I already have some elements already made here that I used in the original picture. And these are simply made inside of Affinity Designer in the assets panel. So what you do is if you make an element that you like, you can select it and then drag it into the assets window right here, and it will store that asset for future use. So that's what I did for my original profile picture. I made all of these, stored them as assets, and I use them in other elements of my branding. So I'm going to delete this to kind of just move on and just show you that example. I'm going to start bringing these elements in and start layering them in the specific parts of the image that I want to bring them into. So I'm going to start off with the square, drag that in, zoom in just a little bit, and then just scale it down like so. And we can put this image just over here. What I'm going to do with these, I'm actually going to send these behind the final picture, but I'm just going to put them in the space that I really want to just, you know, lay them out in. Start with the square for now. We'll make a copy of that by pressing Command J on the keyboard, dragging it over, and then maybe changing the rotation a little bit like so. Now we're going to bring in the cross elements like so. I'm going to drag this one in, scale this down. We put one underneath the Twitter logo like so. Zooming in, giving it some rotation, and just zooming out again. And then maybe Command J again, drag this over, put it next to the Twitch logo just a little bit, scale it, make it a little bit bigger. Varying the sizes of all of these elements will add to the explosive randomness of this. You're going to tweak the size of the square just a little bit as well. Maybe we're going to move it over here just a wee bit. There we go. And then from there, we're going to add some lines. So we're going to click on the line, drag it out, scale it down like so, put it in the position I want, angle the line in a particular direction like that. Maybe make another copy, Command J, bring it over here. I'm trying to create randomness in the image in different ways. So changing up the color, for example, giving some randomness, maybe scaling this down, having a smaller spike right here. Even changing the color of this square, changing the stroke of this to also that red as well. That looks pretty good to me. Maybe make this one just a little bit bigger, this line. And then we're going to move on to these other circles like so. We're going to drag this one out. I actually want to make this one red as well. So I'm going to scale it down, click on the fill, change it to red, scale it down just a bit, move it over here, put it about here, I would say. Maybe duplicate that again, move it over here, make it a little bit bigger, change it to white like that. Maybe Command J, move it over, maybe put it above my head right here, maybe scale it down just a little bit. I will move all these elements behind my head once these final placements are done. Maybe even bring down the Discord logo just a little bit. Now I'm going to start bringing in these smaller dots. And these smaller dots kind of just make up these little spaces here where we can kind of get a bit more detailed, a bit more granular. Maybe this one really small. Command J. This one over here, maybe scale this one just a little bit. Maybe change the color to like a red, like so. Maybe moving this one over here. Put in the space maybe instead. Maybe again, duplicating it again. And putting it up here. Scaling it down. Moving it to a different part of the image. And then kind of just doing that for other elements that you think might work well. Maybe changing up another line. Putting it here. Maybe making the camera just a bit bigger. And just tweaking these elements until you find something that you're happy with. And something you can kind of use and work with in a bit more detail. One thing I don't actually have an asset for is a triangle that I used inside of my original picture. So I'm just going to zoom in right here. And I'm going to click on the Smart Object tool right here. Click on the Triangle tool. And now I'm going to make a triangle shape. We're going to clear the fill. And make the outline a solid white. Make the stroke a white. Then in the stroke properties, I'm going to change the join from a rounded join to a meter join. I can't pronounce that properly, but it's this join right here. I'm going to change this to a 6 to get a bit more of a spiky appearance. And now we can adjust the size and the scale. We tweak how it looks, maybe the rotation a little bit like that. And kind of filling that side with a different shape and add a bit more dynamic to it. You can also then duplicate that again. Maybe bring it over this side. Maybe even flip it. So right click, transform, flip horizontal. And that will then change that. Maybe change the color to red as well. And bring that down just a little bit. Have a bit of variety with the shapes that we have. I kind of want to replace this small dot with another line, so I'm going to delete that. I'm then going to Command J on this line, bring it up, and then scale it down, like so. Zoom in just a little bit. Let me bring it about here, like that. Maybe shrink this line down a little bit. Maybe change the color of this one to a red also. Add some variety like that. And then what I start doing is maybe add some foreground elements. So all of these elements right here are meant to be in the background. So what I'm going to do is select my original image layer. Shift Command and then the right square bracket will bring that layer all the way to the very top. Or you can do layer, arrange, move to front, and that will basically bring the layer you are having selected right to the very top of the panel. If you see now, if I click in here and I then find this square, if I move this, you can see it now is behind me. A couple of other assets that I want to add to this are actually just some things in the foreground. So I'm going to make a little cross layer. Increase the scale of this and change the cap to be a square cap, like so. Change the color to a white. And then we'll just press Command J on the keyboard to duplicate. And just rotate this in 90 degrees like that. So we now have a cross layer. And then what I do is go to Layer, Expand Stroke. And what that will do is that will then make it into solid objects. They're no longer stroke layers. They are basically rectangles. And I'm going to select both of these. Go up here to the Add button. That will then merge all of the shapes together. And then what I do is actually position this in the way that I want it to. Maybe make this one at an angle. So give it a 45-degree angle like that. Maybe put it right here. Create some foreground elements. You know, make things feel like they're in front of me and behind me through the entire picture. Maybe duplicate that by pressing Command J again. Moving it up here. Shrinking it down. Maybe kind of giving it a rotation like that. And then bringing that just about here. I can actually go into the other elements here and move these around to accommodate for the new shape. And find out the right kind of placement for it. Once you're happy with the overall supporting elements, what I like to do normally is add some color correction and add some extra little details that kind of help separate background and separate layers. So what I'm going to do first of all is actually select my actual image, go down into the adjustments layer right here, and add a curves adjustment, just to kind of give me some contrast and some color. I want to adjust the contrast on my face just a little bit. Tweak the kind of darks a little bit more. Play around with the highlights just a little bit. Make it a bit more of a highly contrasted image. And I am looking a little bit blue in the face. I'm going to correct my skin tone just a little bit. So I'm going to click on the layer again, go down to the adjustments and select white balance. And I'm just going to warm up my skin tone just a little bit like that. From here, the next thing I want to do is actually create some background elements to this. So what I'm going to do is select my layer, click on the effects button right here. And I'm going to start off with an outer glow. And I'm going to increase the radius of this. Tweak the intensity, bring that down. I want a subtle glow. I don't want it to be too intense. I'm going to bring down the intensity as well. I'm going to change the color to a red. So I'm going to select the little eyedropper tool here. Click and drag. I want the same red as the YouTube button. And I'm going to click the little fill and it will change that to a actual red color. And then from here, what I actually do is actually use Affinity Photo for the next step. And so what I'm going to do is actually go to File, Edit in Photo. And what that will do is that will then send the whole document into Affinity Photo. It's loading up Photo right now. And it will pull in my Affinity Designer document inside of Affinity Photo. It's probably one of the most powerful things inside of the Affinity Suite is being able to jump between one and the other. And so what I'm going to do here is create a duplicate of my original image. So I'm going to click on the layer, Command J. And then what I'm going to do from this is actually create a new square shape. And I select the square tool. And I'm just going to create a square roughly the size of my overall image. So I'm just going to click and drag and make an image this size like so. I'm then going to go press G on the keyboard to bring up the gradient tool. And then I'm going to go create a gradient from one side of the screen to the other. And then I'm going to set this one to be white and this one to be black. Because we have an outline right here as well, we don't exactly need that. So I'm going to go to the stroke color options and press the clear stroke button right here. And next thing we're going to do is actually then add a halftone live filter to this. So I'm going to select this, click on this button right here, this little live filters button, scroll all the way down and click on the halftone filter. What that would do is create these loads of these little dots, these little shapes in here, and it can get quite disorientating. So I'm going to play around with the cell size just a little bit. And I actually want to adjust this and reverse this because I want the darker areas to be the top here so it fades down into the more solid white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press G on the keyboard and then click on the reverse gradient button right here. And that will just reverse the gradient. So if we're going to a dark to a white. So what we're going to do next is actually cut this out and use my original image as the mask layer for it. So what I'm going to do is select on the copy that I made earlier. Click on the effects button, turn off the outer glow, close this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the layer, click and drag and move it onto the cell shaded halftone look. And as you can see, it's creating a clipping mask around that layer. If I let go of this, we now have the halftone layer that's being masked out by my background image, my silhouette, as it were. So what I'm going to do is actually send this behind my original layer, like that. And I'm just going to offset this. I'm going to hold the shift key and the arrow keys. And I'm just going to move it along to a point where I'm pretty comfortable with it. I'm actually just going to move it around, maybe move it up just a little bit more, like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to group this into its own little group, just the halftone silhouette layer. And then from here, what I'm going to do is actually go into the effects button right here. And I'm going to give it a color overlay. I'm then going to give it a different color. So I'm going to select the color drop down here. Again, select the red that we've been using. And click the eyedropper. And then I'm going to select the blend mode. And I'm going to click on darker color, like so. And what that will do is that will then change up and only use the white section and leave the dark spots that we have here on their own. A couple more adjustments I want to make to this. So I'm actually go back to Affinity Designer. Click on File, Edit in Designer. And then I'm going to just fade out these areas over here. So I'm going to select the artboard, go into the group. I'm then going to go to this glass icon right here, which is our transparency tool. I'm going to click on that. And then what I'm going to do is actually just drag out from the middle and where it wants to fade out to. So clicking and drag from here, it will actually fade out the element. If I show you here, it will create a transparency gradient around the object. So if I just do it from here to here, it will only have this section of my outline. I can then adjust the kind of fade and the taper like that. And that will hide the section of the silhouette. And then what I want to do is actually create some separation and some different layers to create a sense of depth in the image. I'm going to click on the rectangle tool right here. And I'm going to click and drag and make a new solid right in front of me. I'm going to press V. I'm going to change this to just a simple black element like so. And then using the same gradient transparency tool we used before, which is this button right here, or Y on the keyboard, we can then click and drag and move up and create an element of some kind of vignette that kind of helps draw focus up here and kind of creates a nice fall off for the actual image. And then what I like to do is actually duplicate this and put it behind my entire silhouette and my entire outline. So this area here and my solid. And then I'm going to actually extend this up just a little bit like so. Maybe move it up just a little bit as well. So we have some fading elements in the background. So these elements here aren't as strong and aren't as important. I can press Y on the keyboard and adjust the fade on those just a little bit. So it brings more of a focus to my face. And the background elements are still there, but they're not the main focus of the image. And then what I like to do is actually do an overall levels and color adjustment. So I'm going to click on the adjustment layers, go down to the curves, and then play around with the contrast of the overall image with all of the elements underneath it. And that is pretty much a breakdown of how I made the profile picture for my social media channels. And then from here, what I like to do is actually use the same document and the same project to create a new artboard to actually start making the other supporting elements for my online brand, my Twitch brand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the artboard tool over here. And I'm just going to create a simple artboard using the document size for now. I'm going to click Insert Artboard. And then what I'm going to do is actually adjust the properties and the sizing of this. So in the transform controls over here, I want to change the width to be 1920 by 1080. And that makes us a nice HD artboard. Now what the primary focus of this artboard is going to be our offline screen for Twitch. I like starting with the offline screen because it's a nice anchor point for the overall channel. It's the main thing that's going to be visible whenever you're not live. It will be there all the time. So I like to design this first to find a theme, to find a kind of general presence, and to find an overall look and feel for the rest of the brand. So what I'm going to do is select the artboard. And I always recommend naming your artboard, specific names to the things you're working on. And then what I do is actually make this a dark background, not a completely black background. I like to go for 5% gray on my background, so it's not completely black. Then I have some leeway to kind of add a bit more detail later on. In offline screens, I usually recommend having the fact that you're offline on the screen. So I'm going to go into the text tool. I'm going to create a text layer. And I'm going to call this one currently offline, like so. We're then going to change the text color to be white. And we're going to center this using the alignment tools up here. We're going to center the middle and to the horizon, like so. Changing the font, of course, my current default font is SF Pro Display, but feel free to use whatever font you feel comfortable with or whatever one suits your brand. We're going to change this to then be a black. I want this to be quite a bold header, like so. And doing this is obviously adjusted our position, so we're going to make sure these are all realigned again. And the next thing I like to do is add a little bit of kerning to this. Little space between the letters, little spaces, is what I call the kerning. You can do that by adjusting the character options right here. If I move this window, you can probably see it a bit better. This option here is the kerning. It's the tracking of the letters. I can actually increase this and increase the amount of space between the letters. Before we can do that though, we need to make sure that our text is center aligned. So I'm going to click on the center alignment tool, and that will make sure that when we do our tracking, it isn't going to go off this way. It will do it from the center outwards. So at least you have to make this quite a large tracking. So maybe like a 200 or 150. 175 is a nice kind of middle ground. So we're going to stick with that. I then like to hold in the command key or the control key on Windows, and then click and resize this. Get a nice kind of feel and look for it. Maybe even raise it just a little bit so it's above the center line. Then what I like to do is actually have in my times when I'm offline or when I'm online. So I'm going to click on the text. I'm going to just pretty much use the same text layer. I'm going to duplicate this. So pressing Command J on the keyboard, bringing this down. We're going to type in when I'm live on Twitch. So I'm live every single Tuesday and Thursday. At what time? I'm usually live around 6 p.m. on my channel, UK. I like to put UK time rather than BST or GMT because of time zone differences. I'm going to actually just scale this down so it's just a little bit smaller than the currently offline text. I want this to be the predominant text layer in this overall image. The next thing I want to do is actually change the hierarchy of the two text layers. So I want this one the more important one, and this one not as important but still relevant to the overall composition. So I'm going to select the Choosing Thursday text layer. I'm going to change the weight of the font to be a semi-bold. So you have a little bit more of a hierarchy of which one is more important, which way to read this. I'm going to scale it down again just a little bit more because I quite like having smaller subtitle text to a header text. I think it looks quite nice. And the next thing I want to do is actually indicate that what this schedule means and what does it mean to the person's actually viewing this. It just says Tuesday and Thursday. So what I'm going to do is actually include a live button or like a little live indicator to show when I'm actually live on these days. So I'm going to create a new little asset here. And well, for this one, a little bit different to what I currently have, is I'm actually going to make a nice little live bubble. So I'm going to go ahead and select the rounded rectangle option right here, the tool right here. Click and drag and make a nice little red rectangle like so. I'm then going to line it up roughly with the top and the bottom of this text. If you want to have some more precise control, you can make a guide by clicking and dragging and making the guide come out like that. Play around with the height, then just bring the guide out of the way. Play around with the width just a bit later on. But the next thing I'm going to do is actually create a copy of the Tuesday and Thursday text by clicking on the text and pressing Command J. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this over. I'm going to rename this and we're going to call this one Live, like so. And then I'm just going to bring that over the top of the actual button. I'm going to shrink it down just a little bit and play around with the scale of this square. I'm going to hold in the Command key and I'm going to drag in from the center in, like so. And I'm going to select the live and the rectangle layers, and I'm going to make sure they are aligned horizontally by clicking on the align horizontal centers and the align vertical centers, like so. So that is now centered within this bubble. I'm then going to round off the corners of the rectangle. So I'm going to click on the round rectangle shape, press A on the keyboard to bring up these nice smart controls up here, this little orange pip. And then click on that, and I'm going to bring down the amount of the roundness like so, to have a nice pill shape icon like that. And then what I like to do is actually group the bubble, or the little pill shape icon in this case, and the live text all in one little group. So now what I'm going to do is actually right click and click group on these items. And then what I'm going to do is something that's really, really cool. We're going to erase the live text from the pill. Now you can do this by converting the text into a group of objects, or you can do this another way, which I much prefer doing in my workflow, and just changing the blend mode to erase. So we click on the live text, go into the normal blend mode up here, and then select the erase tool right here. And then what that does is it keeps the text live. I can change this to be a different word like hello, and it will still erase the rounded rectangle shape behind it. I can actually move this group around. You can see, we can see through the actual pill shape. It doesn't actually change. It's live and it works really, really well. And I like to do this because it keeps things fluid. I like to change my mind occasionally. It gives me that control over the artboard that I don't get anywhere else. I'm going to play around with the weight of the text by clicking on the text layer and going up here, maybe giving this a heavy, we did a black like that. I'm going to zoom out and you can see it's a nice little live indicator that you can have sitting next to the text like so. It says live Tuesday, Thursday, 6 p.m. UK time. It's a nice indicator, it looks really, really pretty, and it gives you the information at a quick and easy glance. Once I've done that though, we need to make sure these are all centered together. So I'm going to click on my two objects here, the live button and the actual schedule layer. I'm going to right click and choose group. And then what I do is actually then just center this horizontally and make sure that all looks well with the overall artboard and make sure everything is centered together. The next thing I'm going to do is actually bring in my logo next and have that on the offline screen as well. So I'm going to go over to the assets panel right here, click on my logo, drag it down, and then just put it in the middle, roughly, of the artboard and change the color because my branding colors are red, white, and black. I'm going to bring that in the center and use the little horizontal centers button right here to make sure we are aligned perfectly. It's a nice, clean, and simple way of making an offline screen. The next step in this process is creating a banner for our Twitch page, and the resolution for the Twitch banner is exactly 1200 by 480. So we're going to create a new artboard, but this time what I'm going to do is actually create an artboard. I'm going to make a new artboard right below our offline screen. I'm going to click and drag using the artboard tool and just make a rough shape like this. So actually get a bit more refined over here. I'm going to set the width to be 1200 by 480, like so. And that there is our Twitch banner. Twitch has an interesting way of doing their own branding when it comes to banners and how the website works. Twitch has an accent color that you can apply to the entirety of your channel. As you can see here on my channel, it's red. However, this color also changes the background of the web page. As you can see, when the accent color changes, so does the background of the web page. So we actually need to be aware of this and be careful that when we do our banner, that we don't have any colors that can't be achieved inside of the Twitch UI. So things like gradients and gradiating colors from one to the other, we can't exactly do that, but there are ways to get around that, and I can show you in this video. So what we're going to do is actually start off by making a solid color banner. What I like to do is have an alternating color from my offline screen, because it's going to be the primary thing people see when they first visit the channel. I want something that pops really, really well. So I'm going to select the banner, and I'm just going to make it a nice, big, bold red shade, like that. Now, this will be the area that you have for your video, your channel trailer, and things like that, and more info about your stream. So feel free to stylize this as you want, and you could, in some cases, bring in elements that I did over here back into the offline screen, because I want this to be quite a clean, quite a minimal look to my channel. I want to change things up just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is actually bring in my logo and actually bring it in again just to the offside here of my page. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in and position it just above the actual bottom here, because what Twitch do is they have a section here where mostly where this guide is, where will be cut off on the final image. So don't go below here to put your image because it will get cropped off. I would say raise it up to about this, say this kind of upper third, this upper half of the image of the banner is probably safe. So from here, the next thing I want to do is actually just change my logo just a little bit, do a small minor tweak to the thrusters here on the logo. I want to make it just a little bit longer, just give it a little bit more of a sense of movement, a sense of velocity to the logo. So I'm going to select the curves layer right here. I'm going to press A to go to the node tool, and I'm going to select the thrusters right here. And if I zoom in, you can see we just selected the bottom half of these lines right here. I'm going to hold the shift key and then use the down arrow keys on the keyboard to bring them down just over, or actually just past that little line that will get cut off by Twitch. And that just changes up the look and feel of the logo. Maybe shrink the logo down just a wee little bit. Maybe move it over a little bit more as well. Maybe crop off that half of the wing. It's quite stylistic, quite an interesting way of composing the logo on the banner. It's not just slapped on. It's actually got some kind of perspective, some kind of composition. And with everything else on the banner, it will work really, really well. And that is pretty much the simplistic way of making a banner. You can also go above and beyond and make something really, really cool and really, really unique. Maybe have some framing around the edges here to demonstrate where the actual video frame for your channel trailer will be. Maybe include some social media icons underneath of that video, so you have something there to show the audience, show your viewers where your community is based. But say you've done this and you use gradients in your color scheme, you want to have those for your banner as well. You can do that. The only thing you need to make sure of is that the base color at the bottom of the gradient is the color that you're going to be using for the accent colors on your channel. So say, for example, I want this red to be the accent color for the channel. I press G on the keyboard to bring up the gradient tool. I click on the artboard itself and then click and drag all the way up to the top. I can then change this color puck at the top here, make it a different color, and play around with the overall look and feel of the banner. But this bottom color hasn't changed. It's still the same hex value. In fact, I'll probably increase the distance here and have a little bit of a space for the bottom here, because on Twitch, this color will be the color for the accents for all of the elements for when somebody subscribes, or when you have VODs on the channel. It's the accent color for the background as well. So make sure that those two colors are exactly the same. You can change whatever you want to the top. Just make sure it's fixed at the bottom. Moving on to panels. Now, my panels are a little bit different on my page, and I'm going to show you guys how I made the panels on my Twitch page and how I've done them in such a unique way that lots of people have actually commented on them and have said how they look really, really cool and really, really unique. And trust me, people like to see those panels and take inspiration from them. So I'm going to show you guys how you make them in this particular project. Now, the max width on panels on Twitch will be set to 320 pixels wide. So it doesn't matter how wide your panels are inside your artboard, Twitch will shrink them down to 320 pixels. So I recommend actually making your panels 320 pixels wide, because if they're any larger and you have really fine text, then it's hard to read all of that information. But the height, on the other hand, is actually a bit longer. So you can actually have vertical panels like I have on my stream, and my panels are set to 320 by 500. So I'm going to make a panel size of 320 by 500, like so. Just drag out a normal artboard, and then I'm going to change the width to be 320 by 500. And then from here, what I did is actually created several different looking panels and used images to differentiate between the two. So for example, if I create the Twitch panel that I use on my page, I actually use this picture, funnily enough. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to make a rasterized version of this image right here. I'm going to click and drag and select all of these layers, and then going to group them all together, duplicate them, right click, and then choose rasterize and trim. And then I'm going to bring that into the bottom layer here for this panel, shrink it down, put it over here. As you can see, we are working with a transparent image as well, so we need to change the color of the panel as well. So I'm going to select the color of the artboard, bring that all the way down just a bit as well. Next, from here, what I'm going to do is actually then go and make an overlay for this image. I'm going to select the rectangle tool right here, click and drag, and then make a solid rectangle over the top of everything. And then what I'm going to do is actually set the rectangle and then change the opacity to about 80%, I believe it was, for my original panels. That creates a nice translucent and transparent effect for this panel. From here, what I'm going to do is actually click on my original pixel layer here, this rasterized layer for the background. I want to click onto the adjustment layers. I want to make it black and white by clicking the black and white filter like that. Maybe change the red just a little bit, bring that down, and actually have some differential effects going on. Maybe do the same thing for the blues in the image as well, like that. That looks pretty nice. And then from here, what I like to do is then add some text. So what I'm going to do is going to click on the text tool, and now I'm just going to have a simple text there that just says subscribe, like so. And this will be for my Twitch panel that I have on my page, and it's going to be a simple little image. It just tells people to subscribe to the channel if they enjoy the content. I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to change that from black to be heavy. Make sure it's centered horizontally, and then what I do is actually just bring it down just a little bit. I don't want it vertically centered in the middle of the panel, because I want to bring in the Twitch asset we used earlier, the Twitch logo, and have that in the middle of the panel, like so. Shrink it down just a little bit, and then bring the text up just a little bit as well. And that is pretty much how I made the panels for my Twitch page. I just replaced the image behind them and did different ones for all of them. From here, what I also did is actually rounded off the corners of the panel. The easiest way of doing that is by actually rounding off the corners of the artboard. By selecting the artboard, I'm going to click on the corner tool right here, and then I'm going to select all of the corners that I want to adjust, and I'm then going to adjust the corners by clicking and dragging and moving up. And as you can see, what's happening here, it's rounding off the corners from a sharp edge to a rounded edge. So I usually say this is about 20 pixels. You can actually click up here and add in the number itself. And that is pretty much what I did for my panels. So if I click on the move tool right here, you can see now we have a nice rounded panel. And then all I did then was I just duplicated the panel over and over and over again by going up to edit, duplicate, and then moving this one off to the side like so. So you have now 2 copies. I can then rename this one to be my YouTube panel, like so. I can then change the icon here in the middle and go back to the font awesome, drag in the YouTube icon, delete the glitch purple one, and then there we go. We now have a YouTube button. We can then change the text that I have on my channel to be watch. Again, make sure that is centered horizontally. And then you can just change the picture behind it or have the same picture if you have a theme that you're going for. And then that is how I created the different panels that I use on my page. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to learn more about Twitch design, video editing, motion graphics, and overall graphic design, I do stream on Twitch every single Tuesday and Thursday. My links are all down below. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video and learned something from it. I'm super excited to see what you guys can make yourselves. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, take care.